control point is being captured.
Hello there, this is Marxist, and this is 10 Ubers and how they were used, episode 3. We'll be looking at the Demomen class in this particular episode, and this is one that I've really wanted to make, because Demomen and Ubers is one of the most difficult to understand concepts, especially when you're starting out as Demoman. I always used to say to demos who asked to be mentored, starting out, it's all about pacing yourself. There's a time to be super aggressive and shoot all the ammo that you've got, and there's a time to kind of run away. And we'll be looking at 10 different Ubers that were done by various invite teams, and how the demo man on their team managed himself in that particular situation. Our first Uber will be from the Golden Boy of Gaming, Dummy, and we'll see how he manages pushing with advantage. So you see Dummy getting ready to push in here. The Uber's already deployed. And he knows his job is to sort of come in a little bit after and just deal damage to as much as he can. He's trying to deal damage. It's not working out that great because there's stuff everywhere. And ideally what will happen is your team will bait the point so that people get on it. And see here now, with people on the point, everyone runs towards it, and Dummy is much more able to deal damage. So what happened? Well, Dummy's team kind of failed to bait the point, which would have allowed him a lot easier shots because people would be grouped up. But a couple important things happened here that you should always try to do as demo when you're pushing last. He came in with a bit of protection. There was a scout there in front of him. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is that his medic came back to him and knew where he was coming from. That's extremely important because you can't be the man and win games unless you've got your medic there and a scout protecting you. They didn't bait the point, so he had harder shots and he really didn't do as much damage as he could have, but his team still gets the point anyways. For the second Uber, we'll watch Dummy again push last with a pick advantage. Here we see him get a pick, so they're going to go. Now, Dummy knows it's Uber v Uber, so ideally he's not going to get hurt enough to have to fight, but he does. So KBK has to flash and the Uber's a wash, but this time somebody got on the point. So what happened? Well, Dummy knew, since it was Uber v Uber, regardless of that pick that they'd just gotten, he couldn't get in too deep, but that he needed to probably help. Unfortunately, KBK has to flash him to keep him alive. That's just more or less unlucky. And as a result, their Uber is more or less botched. But this time, somebody gets on the point and they win. And it shows you how, even though it doesn't look like Dummy's winning these last pushes for his team, and he's not getting 1 trillion damage and 80 frags, because he's doing things correctly, it creates openings for the rest of his players. And in this case, it was a scout that got on the point that Mix-Up couldn't react to because they chose to focus Dummy. And for our third Uber, we'll be watching Dummy again push with a pick advantage. This time it'll be pushing mid, and he'll have 2 picks. And we see that they get ready to Uber, and then they have Try go in for the Uber. Dummy knows he can't get in because they're going to reply. And then Dummy sets up defensive sticks, which allows Try to get out. So now they just get healed up, their flank pushes in, and everything is okay. So what happened? Well, Dummy knew he couldn't go in deep again because Mix-Up had Uber, even with 2 picks. Dummy can't get that involved. Then they get the pop out, and they have to back up because Mix-Up's Uber comes aggressively at them, and they had a heavy, which is something that they really didn't expect to deal with. And really, in this case, Dummy's really the only player besides the scouts that can. And the reason I show the clip from Dummy's perspective, it was in the Pocket video as well, is the use of the defensive trap, because they were chasing Try, and the trap being there meant that they had to try and find some other way to go instead of fighting Dummy, and that let everyone from the tryhard's flank get in on Mix-Up because a lot of their players were down in the valley but couldn't move forward because Dummy's trap was in the way. And this shows the viability of planning a defensive trap while you're pushing so that you can kind of back up and catch your breath before you go in again, which is a particularly effective tactic to use when you're pushing with a pick advantage, as long as your pocket knows that he's supposed to use the sticky trap so that he can get out and get healed. If he doesn't know the trap is there, then he may not use it. Here we'll watch how RR handles pushing with Uber advantage off of a scout Uber. Here we see RR following in his two scouts. The scouts go for the heavy, and Nels is tanking the gun, which RR kills. And that's an important thing to show here. And then he just tries to find damage. Madmen go for kills, and they also cap the point. So what happened? Well, I picked this video for a couple reasons. One, it shows that RR doesn't want to take Uber because they've already decided who the two people taking most of the Uber will be, and that's going to be the two scouts. It also shows you very clearly as demo how to deal with a sentry gun, and this is something that you could apply to every map. A lot of people think that when you fight a sentry gun, you need to Uber your demo so as to get rid of it and he runs up on it. And while that might be good for something like Gold Rush, it's not really how you want to do it here. You Uber whoever you're normally going to Uber, being as Demomen solo Ubers tend to be bad. And then your demo uses them as sort of a shield because the gun's not going to shoot past somebody. It's going to shoot whoever's closest to it. So then you just use them as a shield and easily dispatch the gun without taking any damage. And that's the main thing to gain from here. Obviously they win because they get kills elsewhere, but that's the most important lesson to take away from this Uber. For our fifth Uber, we're going to watch RR push with a pick advantage, being as Boink has just bombed in and they're going to try and push mid. So we're going to see him begin to push here. And RR is going to play this pretty carefully because he knows it's going to be Uber v Uber and he can't really be involved in the Uber. Now he's going to try to set up defensive sticky traps like what we saw Dummy do earlier. But he doesn't really have enough of them, and a soldier gets through and kills him. This clip shows that RR takes things slow. He knows that he can't be involved in the Uber, but then he kind of doesn't make a decision about what to do. In this case, he thinks about defensive sticky trap and then just decides to run away. And this shows how you need to play off of your pocket or whoever has been Ubered. If Blank had, instead of walking backwards, jumped forward, then RR wouldn't have needed that defensive sticky trap. If Blank is backing up, like what he did, then he has to set up the defensive sticky trap, and he didn't really do that, and as a result he dies. And with a dead Demomen, there's essentially no way for your team to hold unless you get really, really lucky. Our sixth Uber will be from Banny, and it will be a defensive use of Uber, and then we'll talk about what Banny does in that. Banny knows the tryhards are coming in, and they were already backed up to start with. The Uber's deployed and Banny just stays out of it. All he does is make sure the flank is okay. He lets the Uber do the rest of the work. Now, he knows an important fact. The tryhards need to cap the point. So he just waits for them to get on there and then basically just dunks on 3 people. He dies, but his team holds. So what happened? Well, Banny knew that in a defensive situation, his pocket needed as much Uber as possible, so he separates himself from Lansky and lets Lansky move up quite a ways. Then, after the Uber, he recognizes that due to his passive play, he can't really be chased, that it'd be silly to do that for the tryhards, because they have to cap the point. Then, once they set to capping the point, Banny has enough health to contest them, and Demoman tends to win against people who are grouped up in a small space because of stickies. And as a result, the tryhards are unable to continue their push and will end up losing mid because Banny waited and didn't take Uber away from Lansky. Here we'll see Banny push with advantage, full Uber advantage, in a different, more aggressive way. Lansky and Shade begin the push, they have full Uber advantage, and Banny follows in close behind. It's a very traditional style Uber despite the off classes being run. And Banny and Lansky know they don't need to go crazy because the tryhards are on their last and they've got 2 picks. So what happened? Well, Banny went in close to Lansky, but a few important things. He didn't get flashed. He didn't call for medic when he wasn't threatened. A lot of demos will call for medic, and their medic gets sort of worried about them during these sorts of pushes. Don't do that. Unless you're just sort of announcing how close you are to them in case you do need it. And Banny just looks for damage. They end up getting 2 kills, so they don't need to do any more than that. They've secured the point. Unless the tryhards want to get really desperate. Which, in this case, at their own last, usually you won't do. But it shows how the demo can go along with the pocket in advantage pushes, and how they should sort of manage that, as well as the medic, because demo, while he's the strongest class in the game, arguably, he depends on his other players doing certain things to be successful, and in this case, that's what happened. In our 8th Uber, we'll be watching Banny defend last while his team has Uber. So Torqued is already Ubered in, and Banny just bails out to spawn so as to let his own Uber take care of business, and then moves to sticky the point. Torqued is already backed off because of how good their Uber was. Then he just sort of zones out people with his stickies, and now, because Torqued has gone 3 down, they're going to push second. What happened? Well, while there are many different ways for the demo to defend last, this is one of them. And what it is that Torqued's Uber got popped really early. In that situation, Banny doesn't need to really be around because players are going to dive on him to make sure that he dies, because that's one way to work your way into capping the enemy's last. So Banny bails out as soon as he gets pressured, and then he comes back, stickies up the point, and zones out the enemy. His other option, of course, is to be a bit closer and more involved in the Uber, but in this case he doesn't do that, so as to give Lansky a much better Uber, because his Uber is going to be really good as it stands, because Torqued had to pop at the door. So, because Torqued popped at the door, Banny can bail out without really risking his team's last all that much, and it shows how a passive sort of play can turn out for last. Your demo can hang around and do differently than what Banny did, but he has to hang closer to the medic and you risk your Uber. In this case, that probably wouldn't really have mattered because their Uber was already going to be really good. For Uber number 9, we'll be going back in time to the Super Mix-Up season, and we'll be watching Plat push last with Uber advantage. So everybody's buffed and they're going to move in with 3 players. It's going to be Soldier, Demo, and a Scout. They try and zone people off the point. The point is sticky, and they try to bait it out. Now there's someone on, Plat has people to shoot, and that's that. What happened? Well, this is probably the best example in the whole video of how to push with Uber advantage as Demo. In the Uber itself. You zone everybody out, push them back off the point, try and get them to go into spawn or into some far corner of the map to hide from your sticky damage. And then somebody baits the point and you basically just wait for that moment. And then a whole bunch of them are either going to immediately jump onto the point or start running towards it, and then you kill all of them. And that is what you need as Demo every time you push last with advantage. That's what you want to see, and what you should demand of your team on any point when you're pushing with advantage. Here we'll watch how Platinum defends a point Uber versus Uber in Season 10. We see that Quantic is trying to come in here, and Platinum's fighting with him a bit, but he needs to get flashed. Takes out the soldier stuck in the corner, and Quantic has to back out because they go 2 down. They can't face the heavy. So what happened? Well, we see a different example here of how a demo man can participate in a last hold. He basically directly forced their Uber with spam and then pulls back. His medic has to save him at one point, which is different from what we saw with Banny, where he kind of just got out on his own accord, but also didn't really do as much to force the Uber either. And then securing a kill on a soldier, another kill comes down from elsewhere, and Quantic knows they can't overcommit because there's still a heavy that's alive. Had they chose to keep going, that would have just been the end of it. But Platinum stays in, defends, zones out with his stickies, stays alive thanks to Horriblue, and also a little bit of backing up, and also is directly responsible for forcing the Uber. And this has been Marxist with 10 Ubers and how they were used by Demomen. So I hope you enjoyed and found it to be a little bit helpful and informative. If you have any questions or comments, feedback, whatever, go ahead and post it in the comments below or pop me a message and I'll get with you